Thank you so much for joining me today on Just Praise Him Radio. I'm your host, Glenda Lomax, and my job is to inspire you to a closer walk with Christ. Now here's the show. Hello, believers. Welcome to the Just Praise Him radio show. I'm your host, Glenda Lomax, and I have a really interesting story to tell y'all tonight that actually has a good ending. I'm going to tell you a story of fentanyl addiction and how it turned out, how God saved the day. This story is from my family. It happened to my great-nephew, so I'm going to tell you my niece's, his mom's side of the story, and his. I have interviewed them both. I tried to get him on here on the podcast, but he's not comfortable being recorded yet. I pray that he will be soon because I'd love to get him on here. Okay. So this is Derek and Stephanie's story. She said that she did not know he was on anything for a long time. He hid it really well. Until one day she found some, quote, stuff in his room, because he lived at home. He began being very disrespectful to her, and she said he was like always really cranky and moody. Now, y'all don't know my niece, so let me give you a little background. She is an amazing woman. I have admired her for so long, I can't remember when it first started. I don't look up to a lot of people, but she has had my total respect for years. She is probably the best mother I know, on the same par with my own mother. Her first child, Kevin, was born handicapped and mentally retarded. Just one of those weird chromosome things. Never once did she complain. And she did not put him in a home until he was over 20 years old. She took care of him herself. And she forewent getting a college education or a job to do so, and lived poor as a church mouse on welfare so she could stay home and be the person who took care of her handicapped child. So that tells you a lot about what she's like. She is a very honest and trustworthy person. She's the kind of person that you could leave your purse at her house and realize 6 hours later you forgot it and that's where you left it and you wouldn't even be worried about it. She is a person of extremely high integrity with a strong work ethic. And it seems like she's just had a lot of heartbreak and disappointment in life, but she is an amazing person and she is a strong believer. Okay. So she did not know that he was on anything. And then she discovered that he was when she found stuff in his room, and she said, I prayed and I prayed and I prayed. And she said he only got worse. And pretty soon he was lying to her all the time. He wrecked her pickup by rolling it 3 times. And he got out of the wreck with only a scraped knee. I'm surprised she didn't beat him up at that point. I would have been real tempted to, let me give you a few more marks to go with that. Yeah. This happened only a few months after her father died. And so she was grieving when it happened. So she got a car to replace the truck, and he wrecked that when he hit a raccoon. And then he scraped down the side of her car on a pole, and then he threw something and broke the windshield. So 2 totaled cars. She said it was like a horror movie, watching the drugs destroy the son she loved so much and being helpless to do anything. She knew he had a good heart, and he always wanted to do the right thing. And she didn't know, she said, I didn't know how to heal him. I didn't know how to make him well. And she was so worn out from trying and from walking on pins and needles. And she found out later from him that he actually almost died in their house from an overdose. So he tells the story about the rolling the truck. He said, I was on fentanyl then. And he said, I was just starting to experiment with meth. I was on my way back from work. It was about 5 a.m. in the morning. He said, I had fentanyl on me. I remember crawling out the back window of the truck and calling Mom. He said, I had fallen asleep because I was coming down. And he said, I woke up sliding on the wet grass on the only curve on Highway 152. When I woke up, I was sliding in the grass and tried to correct it. And he said, all I could do was steer it slightly left. He said, I wasn't even wearing a seatbelt, and I was trying to avoid a concrete embankment. That concrete embankment would have killed him. All I had was a scraped knee from my son's car seat that was loose in the floorboard and bouncing around. He said, the trooper said, I don't even know how you're alive right now. He said, I did not have a near-death experience because I was flirting with death every day. He said, though I would not have offed myself, I actually wanted to die, but I did not want my mom and my son to have to grieve for me. Addiction makes you want to die. I've heard more than one person say that. He said, my son Lucas was a huge part in getting help. But one day, he said, my mom broke down crying and said, you're killing me. He said, I was just in shock, like I realized I was really killing my mom. And he said, then I suddenly realized I'm her Lucas. He said, that was the turning point. He said, I always experimented with drugs, but I could always walk away from them. But when me and Lucas's mom split and she was keeping my son away from me, his son is everything to him. That's his whole life. He said, my friend introduced me to fentanyl. Can I just say that if you have friends like that, you don't need any enemies? He said, and the fentanyl took away all the pain, all the heartbreak. He said, but then the need for the drug was so strong. He said, God did not deliver me from the desire for fentanyl until I completely surrendered my life to him. And I said, whatever you want my life to be, you can have it. He said, I even stole from my grandparents. In my mind, I told myself I was going to pay them back, but of course I had no way to do that. Growing up, I never stole anything, not even $1 from anybody. And I said, I'm surprised that your mom didn't beat you down for that, man. And he said, I know, I was never scared of my dad growing up. He said, my mom was far more violent. She's just a really tough chick. The bad part is she didn't get mad at me. She broke down crying because I'd done it. And after I ripped off all my fentanyl dealers, I had to get on meth because on fentanyl, you just drool on yourself all day. He said they call meth the soul snatcher because it leaves you soulless. That's a scary thing. And during the time when he had gotten on meth was when I went to visit last summer. I remember after he hugged me when he and Stephanie came in, looking into his eyes and seeing just this hopelessness, and I was so afraid that he might be suicidal because I've seen that look before. He said, I could feel an evil presence attached to me when I was doing meth. I only did meth for about 9 months. I did fentanyl for 2.5 or 3 years. You get far from God really fast on meth or fentanyl. I bet you do. When I was hooked on fentanyl, I stopped reading the Word. I stopped praying. I stopped everything. And Derek was a very strong believer, y'all. He said, one day I prayed and asked God to take that desire to do fentanyl away from me. I had been to rehab 3 times at this time. I really wanted God's help so bad, so I prayed. He said the next day the fentanyl stopped making me high. And the high was what took the pain of not being able to see my son and the pain of hurting my mom and letting my family down and stealing pills from my grandparents. I had so much shame over that. If it was not for the love of my mom and my son, I might have given up. Fentanyl is such a powerful drug, it takes over everything. And I said, so what was the turning point? And he said, me praying for God to take away the high. And that day my mom broke down crying and said, you're killing me and you're going to destroy your son's life. He said, that opened my eyes. And then she left late at night and wouldn't even answer my phone calls. He said, it shook me up. I did not get clean right away, but 3 or 4 weeks later, I realized I either had to get help or I was going to die. And he said, I was chasing the high of being too high. He said, that's where the pain is gone. I chase that every time, and it's the highest you can get on fentanyl without dying. He said, my mom found me in the chair more than once. My lips were blue, and I was gasping for air. Several times my mom found me in the car with my foot on the brake, passed out from it. He said, I had friends who died from half the amount of fentanyl I was doing. I said, did she Narcan you? And he said, no. He said, but I think she keeps Narcan now. He said, I've Narcaned at least 10 people where I'm at right now. He said, they're always really mad because it took away their high. And he said, and I'm like, I literally just saved your life. And he said, you know, you never see an old fentanyl addict. He said, that's because they don't exist. He said, you see old heroin addicts, but there is literally no such thing as an old fentanyl addict. As the addiction progressed, he began stealing from her. First, he would just not repay the money he borrowed from her. She barely got by as it was, but it became so much worse. You can't make much of a living in western Oklahoma unless you own an oil rig or something. Y'all, the jobs there don't pay much. I lived there for many years trying to raise my kids on nothing. It got so bad one day while she was at work, he said, I sold her washer and dryer right out of her house to get money for drugs. I said, if my son did that to me and I went home to that, he said, there'd be a beat down right there. She forced him to go to rehab again and again. Oklahoma City, Stillwater, Tulsa. She was losing hope he would ever recover from the addiction that was killing him. She even paid for him to fly to a place out in California. She had lost so many days of work taking him here and there and somewhere else to try to help him. By the time she drove him to the place in Tulsa, she had no hope left. She had tried everything she knew to try. She was always praying for him. She tried supporting him 100%. She tried tough love. Nothing worked. Maybe because nothing does work until an addict wants to change, because you can't stop for him. Finally, she told the Lord, I give up. He's yours. I cannot do this anymore. She said, and something began to change. She never stopped praying through the entire process. He is in rehab now, she said, but something has changed. He is attending church in there, and the change is evident in how he treats her. She gets him sometimes on weekends to spend time with him, and she said he's now repaying money he's borrowed, bringing her vehicle back when he says he will, and treating her with love and respect. She thinks the new environment and the support of other men like him must be helping him, and that God heard her prayers for sure. Sometimes when the problem is so bad and when the evil is so prevalent, we just have to let go and believe God to do whatever has to be done. And he said, I tell people all the time when they ask me who my hero is, that it's my mom. He said, growing up, I can only think of about 2 times I ever saw my mom cry. I never even knew we were poor. I never once went hungry. And he said, and my dad also did a lot of good. He said, she is the strongest woman I have ever seen in my life. She sacrificed so much, but you could never tell. When Kevin was at home, his crippled brother, she just took it all in stride. She could have put Kevin into a home when he was young, but she chose to live on welfare instead so she could take care of him herself. I have never seen my mom fail at anything. Everything she has ever done, she has succeeded. Not once has she ever let me down. She has always been there for me. The only time I ever saw anything make her break down, I did it to her. He said, now she finally trusts me again. Now she don't have to sleep with her purse anymore. He said, when I told my program manager she gave me a key to her house again, I broke down. He said, that is so huge. She knows I'm back to who I was, and even better. I said, do you have any advice for the parents of other addicts? And he said, don't shame them. Don't enable them either. Tell them you love them, and if you have to, cut them off. He said, if you keep giving them money, they'll just keep doing the drugs. It does not matter how much your child loves you, they will stay on the drugs if you enable them. Every time they reach out for help, be there for them. All it takes is one moment of clarity and someone to be there in an addict's life. He said, I don't know what I would have done if my mom hadn't been there for me. He said, pray. You cannot deliver them from the drugs. They can't even deliver themselves. Only God can. He said, sometimes they have to go to rehab or to jail. And he said, I asked him, I said, do you have anything you want to say to your mom? Because he said it's real hard for him to express his feelings to his mom. He said, I can never find the words to tell you when we're together, but I love you, Mom. I could not have done this without you. I would pick you to be my mom in 1,000 lives. That really says it all, doesn't it? For anyone who has a child you're praying for now, don't give up. Don't stop praying. Don't give up on them. Although it looks hopeless, it ain't over till God says it's over. With God, nothing is impossible. Jesus bless you. Thanks for listening. Y'all have a great week. Thank you so much for tuning in today to Just Praise Him Radio, sponsored by the friends and supporters of JPH. You can contact me by mail at my new address, Glenda Lomax, JPH Inc., P.O. Box 854, Altus, that's Altus, Oklahoma, 73522, or by email at jphtoday@gmail.com. Don't forget to visit the website for prophetic updates at wingsofprophecy.blogspot.com. JPH is not affiliated with any nonprofit organization